I want to make a quick side note point of theology that we can get from one of these 5 points. Part of the shame that God's people were experiencing in this devastation was the fact that the bodies of the dead were unburied. And that is a reminder to us that biblically, the body is important. We are made in the image of God, body and soul, that our bodies bear God's image and likeness because they are how we exercise dominion over creation and how we demonstrate God's character in the world. And that even when we are dead, our confession tells us that our souls are united with God, but our bodies, which are still united to Christ, are to be buried in the ground to await the day of resurrection. And I mention that because you probably are aware that we live in a time and a place and a culture where burying the dead is becoming a rarer thing. It's cheaper and more convenient to choose cremation. And I don't believe that cremation is necessarily sinful, but it's always been the practice of God's people to show respect for the dead and to show hope of the resurrection by burying the dead. I've stood on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem looking out over the Kidron Valley to Jerusalem. You've probably seen pictures of that view. And all along the slope of the Mount of Olives are the tombs of God's people that have been there for thousands of years. And they're there on the Mount of Olives because Zechariah the prophet says that when the Lord comes, he will stand on the Mount of Olives, and they believe those are the first people who are going to be resurrected. So they want to be first in line at the resurrection. So they're there on the Mount of Olives. That's the kind of testimony God's people have always had in the world. Whenever cultures have become impacted by the gospel, one of the things, like archaeologists who dig around in Northern Europe, for example, one of the ways they trace when did this culture shift from being a pagan culture to being a Christian culture? Well, it's when they stopped burning their dead and they started burying their dead, because they showed respect for the body and a testimony of hope in the resurrection. I would just encourage us all to be willing to do the expensive thing. Again, not that cremation's a sin, but I believe it's more honoring to God to bury in hope of the resurrection.